This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 204 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today's topic is island travel. There's something really special and somehow magical about being on an island. There are those who would say that I live on the world's biggest island, Australia. I know when we grew up in school we were always taught that Australia was an island. I'm not sure if I agree, but nonetheless, we're talking islands today, and I'm really concentrating on those small and kind of mystical, magical islands, some of the most favourite places in the world for many travellers. A couple of my favourite islands to start us off, so I have to be, kind of sentimental and throw back to my younger years and remember all of the fabulous trips I've done to Rottnest Island over the years. Rottnest is a small island just off the coast of Perth. You can see it from just down at the beach near my place on a good day, on a clear day. And it's one of those beautiful places where kind of time stops. There's no cars, so you feel like you're, kind of cut off from civilization. There's beautiful beaches all the way around. It's small enough to cycle all the way around. Just in part of a day. Just beautiful. It's one of my favourites. In fact, last year when I was in Queensland off Cairns, I spent a couple of days at Fitzroy Island, which gave that same kind of vibe to me. That was a really special place too. But of course they had some extra things like, the Great Barrier Reef quite nearby and sea turtles and rehab for sea turtles there and all sorts of stuff. So that's another one. If I go a bit further afield, a lot further afield, one of my very favourite trips of any stage was a week I spent on Inishmaan, one of the Aran Islands off the west coast of Ireland with my friend Maria. That was such a cool, amazing place. People who'd lived there for many generations and small population, under 100 people. Really, really cool there on the Aran Islands. And I had a funny blast from the past just recently. I got a message from a woman via LinkedIn, and she messaged me to say, hey, I recognise your name, and I published a story of yours 17 years ago, and it was about a little tiny island called Abruka Island in Estonia. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes to this story because it was about my day trip to Abruka Island, which was, I think, had a population of 14, I think, if I remember correctly. Anyway, and it's an island off Saaremaa Island in Estonia, and it was just an awesome place to be. I love, something so special about islands. So let me stop gasbagging and get on to what my guests have to think about islands today. I'm starting off with Seana Smith, and she tells me some of her favourite experiences on islands as well.
I think one of the reasons that I have loved going to islands and find them terribly exciting is that when I was a kid, we used to go on our holidays to the coast of Scotland, where there are hundreds of islands, of course. And when I was a little girl, we used to have a boat, and we would all get on the boat and sail around. And first of all, we had a little boat where we camped, and then we had bigger boats where we sailed around. Of course, by the time I was a teenager, I loathed these holidays. But when I was young, we loved them. And we had so much freedom. Myself, we used to row to the islands, we'd charge about them. But these islands have the most wonderful names like, Berneray and Barra and Lewis and Harris. And there are hundreds of them. So I think that I've often been looking for islands, and when I think about the places where I have had the greatest excitement, it's often been on some kind of an island. And I've got these islands that I feel I must go to. So one of them long ago was Zanzibar. I always really wanted to go to Zanzibar because it just had the most exotic name, of course.
Yes, it is a beautiful name, I agree.
I remember thinking, I really must get to Zanzibar, and their little island. And one day I did go to Zanzibar, and I still look back at that as one of the most exotic things I've ever done in my life. Well, it was great. Even better, there was a little island off Zanzibar where you could go. And there were great big tortoises on there, and you could go swimming around. So those were wonderful. And then another island that I went to and just had the experiences that when I'm an old lady and I can't move anymore, or can't get around, these are the ones that I'll look back on and think, I cannot believe I did that. That was so exotic. I think I was brought up in a very small Scottish town and it was freezing cold. So even when I'm somewhere that feels, tropical and exotic, I can't quite believe I'm there.
Yeah.
So the other one that I had the most wonderful experience on is off the coast of Borneo, and I was scuba diving there on an island called Sipadan, which is a famous scuba diving island. Wow. And I went there before there was any building on it, which has now been taken off. And the diving there was just out of this world. It dropped off, so it was sort of like sticking up on its own, and it dropped off, and there were all these sharks and turtles and whales. And we were camping there, and a turtle came up and it dug a hole under my tent, so I had to get away. And it laid its eggs there, and I had to go sleep somewhere else. So anyway, that was great. But the island that we lately had the best time at, and in the same way of just having quite a transporting experience that will stay with you forever, was the little island called, it's just off the coast of, I'm just having a brain freeze, I'll start that again. Just can't remember the name of it. Just hang on a wee tick.
No worries.
I'm having a brain freeze. Hang on, I'll just go
Google it.
Remind myself of it. That's because I've got overexcited.
I do that too.
Yes. A tour island. So the island that I've lately had one of those amazing transporting experiences that was a Turo Island, which is off the coast of Dili. And I had been reading about East Timor for many years, and I'd read about this island and about a place that you could stay there called Barry's Place, which sounded very simple and eco-lodge, but was still comfortable enough to go with the children too, I hoped and thought. Anyway, we went there last year, and it really was, I suppose it's because it's so simple. Most people who live on that island are fishermen. There are hardly any tourists. The snorkeling is superb there. And then the place that we stayed was very well laid out. There's no hot water. A lot of the electricity is from solar panels. And we spent most of our time reading books, chatting to other people, meeting this extraordinary Australian. I don't know what it is about Australians, but they get everywhere, stay for donkey's years, and then really help you interpret the life that you would never you've got somebody who can really tell you all about it's been there for a long time. So that was the last time that I went to an island and just thought, this is home, this is where I should be, and simple. And it made me feel, it was one of those sort of life-changing, except it made me feel as if I was going back in time to when I was a backpacker, So, when you're a backpacker and you can wander about and then you meet the most extraordinary people and you're not in a hurry, I felt as if I hadn't been somewhere so simple and where there was a lot of time for a long, long time. And the people who were there were fascinating. There were teachers from the Northern Territory. There were all sorts of people from Europe. There were people doing scuba diving expeditions. There was a guy who's a teacher in the Tiwi Islands who was a real chatterbox. And then there was a young American guy who's a Peace Corps volunteer who spent ages talking to my twins, really, and they got a lot out of that. Anyway, that was the latest sort of trip that I've had that was just made me feel as if I was young again and my eyes were wide open and that I was sharing something with other people,
I was so intrigued that Seana feels islands are just so tropical and exotic because of where she grew up in. I think she described it as a small, freezing Scottish town. But I, having grown up here in a completely not small and freezing place and quite near an island as well, I still find all islands completely exotic. There's something about that self-contained part of them that is just fascinating. Now, I did look up Barry's place, which Seana mentioned in Timor-Leste, because I was just really intrigued by it. Also, my dad's name is Barry, and so it just seemed I just wanted to look it up. And it sounds amazing because one of the things on their website says that I'll read it. Due to the sporadic and unreliable internet connection, as well as our lifestyle, Barry's Place Arturo regrets to advise we're unable to do any online bookings. Please make bookings via phone or SMS. So I love that it's an unreliable internet connection as well as their lifestyle. So they're obviously having a good island kind of life there. And I want to go there now. It sounds amazing. But, one day. Now, my next guest just has a quick story to tell about Komodo Island in Indonesia. And it was too fun not to leave out. So this is Ben Pearson from World Animal Protection with a quick story he likes to tell regularly.
It involves the bloke I travelled through Indonesia with in 1997, and we decided that we would go east from Bali. You're going out towards Timor. It was quite basic. It was lovely, but also quite basic. We ended up out on the Rinca and Komodo Islands where the Komodo dragons are. And Sean and I were out there, and I always remember this, and I love telling it, particularly when Sean's around, for reasons that will become obvious. We were standing there behind a little barricade that the locals had put up, and there were some Komodo dragons. And if you've seen Komodo dragons, they're massive, but they don't look particularly dangerous, and they kind of just, they just hang around looking relaxed, essentially. And we were all taking photos, and Sean was saying, I want to get closer. The locals were saying, don't do it. Hati hati, they were saying, be careful in Indonesian. Sean finally says, no, I'm just going to get over this thing a little bit. Steps across, starts walking towards the Komodo dragons. The Komodo dragon is priceless, just kind of lifts its head slowly, looks towards Sean and starts walking towards Sean, at which point Sean literally sort of jumps 4 meters back behind this barrier. The Indonesian guys were there, laughed their heads off. They just thought that was priceless. And anyway, I tell that story not only because it's funny, but because, of course, in my current point of work, it's a very good example of treating wild animals with respect.
Yes, exactly. That could have ended up much more badly than it did. And yes, there's a reason for the barricade, isn't there? So
that's right. Keep your distance.
So there you go. That is a true case of beware of the dragon. Now, my final guest today, speaking about islands, is Nan Caple, who actually now owns and runs some accommodation on Kangaroo Island off of South Australia. And Kangaroo Island is somewhere I have not yet been, but I have delved deep into looking into it. I've nearly taken a trip there. It was quite a few years back, but I really, really want to get there someday. And Nan takes me back to her, some decades back when she and her family with lots of young kids started holidaying in Kangaroo Island. And really, it does sound like a place I will one day get to and absolutely adore.
Yeah, Kangaroo Island, it has been such a special place. That very first decision that we made, and it was through looking at the good old RACV magazine, which I'm not sure if you have a similar one in Western Australia, but
we do.
In the back couple of pages, there are these little tiny inserts of where you might want to travel, and we'd chosen a few over the years then when we were travelling with the young kids. So it was through one of those that we chose a little house at Vivon Bay on the south coast of Kangaroo Island. My husband's family live at Warrnambool, so we'd spend Christmas Day with them. We then bundled the trailer and the canoe on the top, and off we went. And we caught, I think, the 6 o'clock ferry across. So by the time we landed on the island, and we had 4 little kids, so they were all, when are we getting there? That was about when you got out of Warrnambool, and here we were, a good 8 hours away, and then you'd have the ferry ride, and then so it was a long journey. And Kangaroo Island is quite a long island. It's 150k long by 50k wide, and it varies in shape along there. But we headed off onto the south coast probably a little too early on our journey. Then our very first journey, we took the very first turn that said south coast, and we probably should have taken the fourth. So it meant we spent twice as long on the corrugated road.
Oops.
Also at that stage, the supermarkets weren't as well equipped, so we bought a lot of food with us. I do remember all 4 children were sound asleep by the time we actually found our little house, and we had travelled for probably 50k on these corrugated roads. And when we eventually got the kids into bed and we were unpacking the car, and I'd taken 2 dozen eggs, and we did not have one egg that was still in the box. They just rattled themselves, totally broken. But it was a fabulous little house, and it was a little elevated on an area that was swarming with just native wildlife. So there were the little wallabies and the kangaroos, and it was just magical. And for the children, the road was corrugated, and there was a little shop at the Vivon Bay store, which was probably a K for the kids to ride their little bikes. And it used to be a morning journey, and they actually seemed to take delight in the fact that they'd go down and buy the milk, and they'd put the milk in their tracksuit pant leg. And as they were riding along, the corrugation would eventually mean that the milk would burst out, and then they'd ride over it. So there was this great hysteria about, we've burst the milk again, So they had lots of fun there. But we did have a terrific holiday at Vivon Bay then, and then the following year the couple that we ended up buying the special block of land on the north coast with came over, and they chose a different place to stay. So we started to venture around the island, and it has such a lot to offer. It's incredibly remote, but with a lovely temperament. From us in Victoria, it's considerably north. It's about level with Canberra, so it is considerably. So, enjoying the summer there was really very special. And the north coast, certainly this Vivon, the Snellings Beach area that we have eventually settled in, had a lovely story with a family that had been living in that area for a long time. And they had an amazing fig tree that you could venture inside and have fairyland. The children, we used to take them in there and tell them these wonderful stories. So it's inside this huge fig tree that were branches that you could climb on, and they'd sort of created little spaces. So it was an absolute fairyland for the kids. And they also there was a very old rusty shearing shed that internally they'd made into a warm space, and we actually carried dinners and had them inside this shearing shed as well. So there were wonderful adventures that we had. There's another wonderful little spot on Kangaroo Island's north coast called Stokes Bay, and you pull up to the Stokes Bay beach, and it's quite a pebbly beach, and it's nothing too special, but you follow the little sign that says to the beach through a rocky corridor, which can be quite daunting if you're a bit claustrophobic. So it's quite narrow, and you have to duck down low, and you really are in there for probably 60-70 metres. So it is a sense of, you need to know that you're getting out on the other side, or you could have the old heart racing a bit too much.
Yeah.
You come out on the other side to this amazing, amazing beach, which is very protected, and there's a bit of surf, and there's sort of a natural pool, and it's just magical. So that's another really special spot on Kangaroo Island that's a must do. And these really aren't the spots that are very well known, as in the seals and the wonderful lighthouses at either end, and the remarkable rocks, which are truly remarkable. That island's a very special island to us. And there are so very few tourists because of the reasons we've mentioned, that you do have to fly there, and you do have to hire a vehicle or come on the ferry with a vehicle, and it is a very big island, and the road network is amazing, but it isn't the island isn't totally covered, and there's only some sections that are fully made. So even though they are well maintained, there isn't hundreds of vehicles at all at any stretch. So, at our beach there can often be half a dozen other people, and that's relatively busy. So, that's a lovely thing to have in a world where we're often amongst lots of people.
Kangaroo Island is definitely a vast and amazing kind of wilderness place as well. It's different to our Rottnest Island here near Perth, but those stories from Nan make me really remember the vibe of Rotto when I was younger, and the way that kids can really enjoy it. It's a place where there's no cars, that they can hop on their bikes and head down to the local shop. And it's kind of that, I don't know, it's kind of a throwback to what we imagine, perhaps nostalgically, as earlier, freer, safer years. I don't know. But curiously, I have actually just promised my son that I'm going to take him to Rottnest for a few nights later in the year, because although he's had a couple of day trips there, he has never actually stayed overnight there. And I always say the magic of Rottnest Island is after about 4:30, when all the day trippers have left and you're just there, the way I imagine Rottnest should be. So a bit quieter and really chilled out. So I guess that's some of the stuff I like about islands. And hearing all of these guests today has just made me feel even more determined to start exploring even a few more islands when we can. So, on that note, a huge thanks to my guests today. We started off chatting with Seana Smith, and Seana runs a website, Hello Sydney Kids, so you can find more from Seana at hellosydneykids.com.au. Also thanks to Ben Pearson from World Animal Protection. So yeah, don't mess with wild animals like Komodo dragons or any others. And you can find more about that organisation at worldanimalprotection.org.au. And finally, I chatted with Nan Caple, and she runs a property, some accommodation on Kangaroo Island. There's 2 homes for 6 people each, and they look beautiful. I want to stay there one day. Anyway, you can find out about that property at snellingsview.com.au. So thank you to those wonderful guests. Thank you, listeners, for coming back every week. Don't forget, if you're not in our Facebook group, come and join us, Thoughtful Travellers. You can just search for Thoughtful Travellers in Facebook, or find the link in the show notes. For this episode, the show notes are at notaballerina.com/204. As always, thanks so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.